In my last video, I showed you how to modify this spider miniature right here with a couple of cool tips and tricks to really make it creepy. In this video, we're going to make a base for it, and that base is going to be this swamp diorama that can also double as the next terrifying entrance to one of your adventures. We're going to do that this week on Tabletop Witchcraft. Ah! Hey there, welcome back to Tabletop Witchcraft. This week, we're going to build a base for a spider miniature that we worked on in our last video. And to do that, we're going to make this really cool, ultra-realistic swamp base. I was able to do this with use of some products that were sent to me by Diorama Presepe, some absolutely gorgeous products, a pleasure to work with, and the realism on this is just unbelievable. Pop a few of these in here, and it just instantly comes to life. Now, if you're interested, I'm going to show you a little storyboard, of how I go from A to B when I first sit down with thinking about a project like this. I start with paper. In some instances, like this one, I'll do a super quick craft. I literally built this whole thing in a day on my first go. So I'll show you. It's actually kind of funny when you see it, but it gives me an idea of what I'm going to be working with and what obstacles I might have to overcome. So I'll show you the paper version, craft one, and then the final product all together at the end of the video. All right, if you're ready, let's go grab some supplies and let's get crafting. All right, so we're gonna kick this video off by getting our creativity flowing right out of the gate with some aluminum foil. We're gonna take this and use it to create some rock molds instead of having to, buy some from online, or if we want to get a specific shape, like a round one, I'm gonna use this wiffle ball right here. And it's going to help us to reduce the amount of plaster that we need. And I'm just going to shape it around the wiffle ball, and then I'll put a link up above to my video that I show using hydro stone and working with it. But we're essentially just going to press it into our really quick handmade molds with this aluminum foil. And so we're not using a ton of it, or it's not super heavy. We're just going to stick this wiffle ball in it. I've sprayed the wiffle ball in the bag with some debubbleizer. It's just going to help it so it doesn't stick and kind of makes it nice and smooth on there. Now, ripping the aluminum foil off, don't worry about being super careful with that. Again, this is just a rock, so if it chips or breaks, no big deal. Cutting the base for our entire diorama out, I'm just going to do this on some dollar store foam core. It's what I had laying around, as well as this foam right here. I don't think I've ever used it on the channel. This stuff is a complete mess to work with, but it's a great filler. You could probably find this free in most large objects that you purchase, like a TV or a microwave, stuff like that. So once I have my mound all sculpted, I'm using my spider to make sure that the shape is just right and that the spider will be angled just the way I want it once I'm done. Now you can see how much of a mess this stuff is to work with, and I tried to stay as clean as possible. Halfway through I said, look, I'm just going to make a huge mess and spend a few minutes vacuuming up my shop. Actually took probably about a half an hour. So now that we've got the basic shape down, we're going to take this hot wire knife and cut a hole into it. And I'm going to make the hole sort of in the shape of a cone. That way it gives the illusion of depth going into the hole. Now be careful when working with plaster, cast pieces like this. I find that it really sucks the heat out of the hot glue very quickly. So add it to the foam core and not to the cast rock. It'll allow you a few more seconds to work with it. Okay, digging into my pre-made box of cast pieces, I'm going to grab some of these stones right here, and they worked out really nice, but by the time I was done adding Sculpt-A-Mold and everything to this base, they didn't stick out as much as I'd like them to, so keep that in mind when you're embedding them. Now for our tree stumps, I'm going to use 4 different sizes of paper towel roll. It's great to keep all these on hand, and you're just going to basically cut them on sort of like an angle and press them right into place. That's another nice thing about this foam, is it really allows you to work with it and kind of press stuff right into it very easily. And that was just a branch right there that I wanted to have some spiderweb branching out onto that later on in the video. Now I'll put a link up above to one of my tree videos where I show this method of making roots and trees. It's a really cool video. It's a very popular video. And this is a very fun way of making roots and stuff like that. So you're gonna make it basically out of aluminum foil, twist it on there, add some bark, get it to the shape that you want. It really removes the shape of the paper towel roll. And then you can close the top off with some of that aluminum foil, and then adding texture, just like DM Scotty does in one of his earlier videos. He uses hot glue, and that's what we're gonna do right here. And really just have fun with this, adding roots all around the rocks, the stumps, up the base, anywhere you see fit. Wrap it into that hole like you can see right there. And yeah, like I said, it's a ton of fun. All right, really cool tip. Using a hot wire knife, this attachment right here allows you to add the bark texture to the hot glue a lot easier than using the glue gun itself. You can get some nice fine marks in there. So I would use that. Just make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. And now, sort of just like you'd be using a 3D pen, we're going to use the hot glue gun to add some knots to the stumps that we've made already. Alright, now if you noticed earlier, this first stone was sort of a practice run for me. I left some aluminum foil on it. It was very angular. So I'm just adding a little bit more mixed plaster over the top of that and texturing it with some aluminum foil. Now we can either add tuna fish, or like I like to do right here, some Sculptamold to the craft to cover up that foam and give us a nice base for the rest of our flocking and static grass. And all I'm doing is using a little bit of water. Don't be afraid to get a little extra on here. You're not really going to damage the strength of the Sculptamold. And blend that in real nice into the roots. You can see we add the Sculptamold after the roots because it gives us the illusion that the roots are coming out of the ground. Now we're going to do a nice Mod Podge and black paint mixture over the whole thing to give us a uniform base, and we're ready to start working on painting this whole thing up. And this whole section right here, you can pause the video to give you an idea of all the paint colors. I was in love with the one color here on the top right that I used for the stumps. Now getting back into the dry brush, I used these 3 colors right here for the stumps. If you look online, a lot of these swamp trees, they're really gray in color, so that's what I was going for. And I used a black wash and now a brown, almost like a sepia wash from Vallejo over the mud. And if you're going to use this style of a brush to apply your dry brush, you really want to have almost no paint on it. Otherwise, you're going to get streaky marks. All right, absolutely in love with Diorama Presepe. They sent me a bunch of stuff that I've had for a while, and this is the perfect craft to break them out. I've taken 2 things that they sent me, and I made a nice foliage clump, as you can see right here. And I'm going to use a couple other products that they sent. Initially, again, this was going to be on a dry base. I decided to make this into a swamp, so you're going to see some other plants that I'm going to add here in just a minute. Now I'm using these 3 different textures of flocking, some fine and coarse, 3 different colors as well. I'm using World War Scenics to apply that. And I'm working over parchment paper so it's easy to pick it up and reuse the excess. Now we're going to break out the static grass applicator, and I'm working with some 2mm static grass, working my way all the way up to 6mm. And I'm just adding some extra glue because I'm going to rough this up and just move it around so it really looks knotty. Right? I don't want this to look like a nice area to be walking in. I want it to look real nasty. Now to my foliage clumps that I made earlier, I needed some greenery in it, so I went back to my Diorama Presepe box they sent and added these little green pieces. And I really am in love with their products. They're delicate, but they're very beautiful to work with and add some realism and life to craft very quickly. Here's just a few extra ones that I added in. And very simply, I'm just using hot glue to hold these in place. I'm going to add some other stuff here in a minute, but I wanted to add those because we're going to add resin to those first. Now, I had to go out and get some plastic. Believe it or not, I had no more plastic on hand for my resin barrier. So I bought these cars. I'm going to make some Gasland cars out of these. Check out Televised Carnage on YouTube. He's got a lot of creative ways of making these cars. Alright, now that I got my barrier all made, I'm going to place that on top of the second base that I had. Again, if you look right there in that first one, it's angled. and I wasn't able to place a nice vertical plastic strip around that for the resin. So once that's in place, we're going to our super clear epoxy. This stuff, absolutely amazing. I've been using this now for a while on the channel. Sets up real nice. Bubbles, not an issue with it. Just do yourself a favor, mix it properly, and I used some black and brown ink. Now I'm going to add this to a bag. Check this out. I knew I wanted to get this in a lot of nooks and crannies, and I had a very small area around the diorama to pour the resin. So just like you would in a pastry bag, I just cut the very end of that off, and now I can literally apply this resin to wherever I want in little puddles and pools around the entire diorama with no mess. Alright, now this was my daughter's idea to add some duckweed to this build. I'm just using a funnel and some of this foliage right here by Woodland Scenics, and it's going to get saturated and build up into the resin. Totally fine. Looks really awesome once it cures. Now we've got the green. We got to add some more colors, like we have green and brown plants. I want green and brown stuff in the resin in the water as well. Now obviously we got to add some, moss and some leaves into these stumps. It would definitely build up in areas like this. And again, don't forget to layer. We've got we've got brown. Now we got to add the green as well. Okay, I wasn't going to go this route for the spider webs in the video, but I was literally walking by the Halloween section in Home Depot. This stuff was like 98 cents. So I grabbed it, and I was very impressed with how stretchy and realistic it actually was. It's a lot better than going with just cotton that you'd get for like stuffing a pillow. So you want to stretch this out really, really, really thin. If it's on there thick, it's not really going to look right. Now I've taken the old dryer sheet method, frayed the ends. It's going to look a lot better once it's rolled up. It's going to blend the edges together so you don't see that straight line of the edge of the dryer sheet. Shoving that into the hole. I didn't even glue it. I just pressed it right into place. And then I poked a hole into the webbing. Now I'm just going to pull the dryer sheet on the outside of the webbing, applying a little bit of hot glue underneath, and we can stick it all right in place. It's not going to go anywhere. Then if you want, you can layer another piece of that spiderweb webbing over the outside of the dryer sheet, which I did later on to conceal even more the outside of that dryer sheet. And don't worry about, where the hot glue is on the diorama. We're going to cover that up in some flocking in a minute. The main thing you want to make sure you do is to cut right there and have that stuff feather out to nothing, just like that. Now, because I'm nitpicking on details, I didn't like all these little frills sticking up. I didn't think that looked realistic, so I'm just using a pin here, and it's very satisfying actually to clean up the edge of the spiderweb and have it just go exactly where you want it. Okay, now we can cut the little lip that's always left on a resin pour. It usually comes up maybe about a 1/16 of an inch over the top of the pour. Cut that away, mix a little bit more resin and paint it over it, and you'll never see that cut line once that cures. Alright, so here was my initial drawing of what I wanted this to look like. I knew I wanted a mound. I wanted a couple of stumps here, the big funnel right in the middle. And, I wanted this funnel, I wanted some rocks, but as you can see, I didn't do anything really for the base. So that's why I really changed throughout the video. Went from that solid ground that I was going to have to a resin pour. Now don't laugh, here is my first build. I did it in about 20 minutes. And you can see this really just gives me an idea of what's possible. These were my tree stumps. Here were some rocks in the front. And I had the dryer sheet that I wanted to use for my funnel web. I want to get a quick idea of what it would look like. And I didn't know how I was going to attach it to the stumps. So I tried using some hot glue. You can see just how strong that is. But I didn't like how it attached to the dryer sheet. So I opted not to go that route. But I think I might use this in an upcoming video because this stuff actually really does hold up well and looks really nice. And obviously, for the final result, we got this one right here. Alright, if you have a fear of spiders, I hope this series is helping you get over it just a little bit. Now, if you're going to give this diorama a go, make sure to check out Diorama Presepe. I'll put a link in the description below. Their products are absolutely gorgeous. And for your next resin pour, give super clear epoxy a try. I'm telling you, you're going to love this stuff. Now, really cool announcement. Tiger Skull RPG is making a miniature of me, and I'm going to tell you in an upcoming video how you can get your hands on it. So make sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell for further notifications so you don't miss out on it. Check me out on Patreon if you want to give the channel a little support. And until next time, I'll see you around.